Well, hey folks, welcome back. It's been a while. Been out in the garage last week or two, getting back into some things. For those of you who are on the forums, you probably saw that I had started dissecting my cowl because I don't need to have the blower motor anymore because I'm going to go to vintage air. So there's not going to be a blower motor here or heater box. So what I've done, I've cut out this section right here where the blower motor kind of mounted up to. And then once I cut that out, this is like the blower motor intake. So that was up inside there as well, and I went ahead and cut it out because it makes more room to access back in there. So then I sandblasted it, found a little rot spot, and now I am determining what I want to do with this. I've seen it, the vintage air routed directly into the firewall here, and they have this just a panel right here, and I've also seen them run it up through the bottom of this cowl, kind of inside the inner fender. So I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do it. My concern with running the lines in this section is if they do leak or the anything happens and potentially the fittings leak or whatever, it would kind of suck to have to take the fender apart and pull it off the truck to mess with those fittings. So once again, not really sure how I'm going to do it yet. I need to go ahead and get it, but I've been on the hunt for an engine and a transmission, which right now and for the last while, they are not very affordable. So anyway, before I go buying anything else, like the vintage air and all that, I am going to wait until I have an engine in hand. That's why I haven't done anything with the frame yet. That's why I haven't bought a fuel tank yet. That's why I'm not going to get in a bad spot and have purchased a bunch of stuff that potentially I'm not going to use. So, long story short, what I've done is I've decided I'm going to close this off. Now, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and make these pieces, but not weld them in and wait for my vintage air to get here and see how I want to mock it up. Basically, what's going to need to happen is once I get the engine and the transmission, I know I'm going to need engine mounts, and I know I'm going to need a transmission cross member. So I'm expecting to have to do some work. Luckily, I believe my transmission cross member is bolted. Yeah, the rivets are gone and it's been bolted. I couldn't remember. So that'll be hopefully pretty easy to swap. And then engine mounts is nothing too. So once I get the engine mounted, my intentions are going to be to go ahead and mount the cab and put all the front sheet metal on and see how everything's looking, and then start mocking up where I'm going to route everything. Another bit of news is I did pick up a reproduction bed, which it's kind of being drowned out by the light. Got that for an okay deal. The gentleman, I had to drive quite a ways to go get it. The gentleman noted that there was some damage to one of the corners by the taillight, and I don't know if I missed it or what, but essentially it was one of those stories where I got it home and a dent turned into a lot more than just a dent. The entire corner is kind of cocked in, and yeah, I haven't messed with that yet. I already had a new tailgate, so I went ahead and ordered all the hardware, new hinges, all that stuff, and put what I could on. I didn't put anything on that particular side just because it's going to need to be repaired anyway, so haven't decided what I'm going to do with that. Anyway, back to this. I made this cardboard template, and what I want to do is, if you can see that, I want to match this flange all the way down into here. I will make this, enclose this space, right? And then from the top of this curve down to the bottom of this curve, I'm gonna match the other side of the firewall. And I don't know if anybody's already noticed it, but there, on the factory firewall, there's a hump here which doesn't match that side. So I went ahead and cut that hump and worked it hammer and dolly. It's gonna need some filler, obviously, to get it perfect, but it's good enough. So these are just kind of custom touches that I wanted to do. Once I get all the goodies and I get the cab back on the truck, I get a pedal assembly, blah, 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 I'll know kind of what all I can fill in and what I can't, and go from there. So I'm not doing anything jumping steps. So this is kind of where we're at. I'm just prefabbing some panels. Now, I might end up purchasing some pre-bead rolled panels for this section. It just depends on how well I can get some pieces to come out. I don't have maybe all of the tools I need necessarily to make the panels work like I want them to, or as good as they would from buying them. So anyway, haven't gotten there yet. All I know is I want to fill this in with a solid piece, and I don't believe anybody sells one like I want it. So my first attempt to make this piece came out like this. Let me see if I can get the glare to not reflect. And it turned out okay. You know, I'm gonna have to weld up those seams, and it could use some hammer dolly work. Not bad, but not really as smooth as I would want it. And the way I did that is I just used my template and made kind of a buck similar to what I did with the B-pillars, the rear pillars. I did a similar deal like this if you watch those videos. And if you don't have a bead roller or other equipment, you can do something like this. So I made this whole piece with a buck set up like this, and I just bolted them together. The bolts go all the way through. Drilled 3 holes in the sheet metal. And if you can tell, I did have to heat up the corners and cut them to get some stretching in there. So anyway, that's how I did that. I'm fortunate enough, though, that I've got a good buddy of mine who had this bead roller here, and he's letting me borrow it, and we're gonna play around with it. So what I've done is I went ahead and cut out another sheet and drew a flange on there, and we're gonna attempt to bead roll this. Now what I may have to do is slice this piece kind of in half and then weld it back together, because these curves really make the panel want to distort. So I've only used a bead roller like a handful of times. Anytime I had a flange like you've seen, I either did it with a buck or did it in the brake. So this is kind of cool. if I can't get it to work out like I want it to, the buck really kept this piece flat. So this is worst case, but we're going to try and make it a bit smoother. So that's what's kind of going on. As far as my cab goes, you know, some people who've been watching, who haven't been watching every one, might have been getting confused, because the other cab that I did for the gentleman was the same color. So they were seeing, they thought there was only one cab, but there's been two on the videos that I posted between videos. So this is my personal truck that I'm just now getting back to. Oh yeah, we got some pretty good distortion going on. You probably can't tell, but it's low here and high here. So we're gonna do a little bit of work here and try and get that cleaned up and a little bit flatter. Oh yeah, that curve ender, look at that. See here. Oh yeah. Try and get that curve out of there. So I've finished up the piece for the most part. The bead roller really helped out. It's relatively flat. And it fits in there well. I'm really happy with how it fits. I still have some work up in the inside to do, and potentially up from the inside of the cab also. I've kind of put this on hold. There's been, as usual, a lot going on. One of the issues that I ran into when working on this was I did a partial disc brake swap, and what I mean by that is I did my disc brake swap to work with power assist steering. And after consideration and talking to a bunch of folks, I determined that power assist really was not the best thing for me. And unfortunately, I bought $100 or $200 worth of parts that I'm not going to end up using. So what I did was I went back in the back, and on my donor frame that I still have, I pulled the Saginaw gearbox off of it. Well, after purchasing an $80 Pitman arm, taking the time to clean it up and painting it, I came back out to find that the input shaft seal was leaking. And then took that apart to find that it needed a partial rebuild. So after 3 kits and countless phone calls and about a week of dealing with not being able to find the right kit, I finally got a hold of a power steering company that specializes in that era, power steering and rebuilding kits and that sort of thing. And they explained to me that I had, for lack of better terms, an off unit, which was essentially an in-between model that they only use for a very short amount of time, and it's difficult to find the parts for it. And they did that a couple times over the years, and they, every so often they get a phone call from somebody like me who has one of those units, and they just cannot find all the right parts for it. Primarily what was happening is I can't get the right seals, and I cannot get the right needle bearing. So I kind of stopped what I was doing and thought about it and said, you know, the time and the money to try and attempt to get this gearbox rebuilt now is frustrating. What is it going to be like in 15 years or however long later when I need to address maybe this issue again? So I said, I'm not going to deal with that. Right now, what I'm considering is rack and pinion. However, all of the rack and pinion conversions I see use aftermarket tubular control arms, and they also use an aftermarket sway bar, because the pinion angle coming off down to the spindle is going to intersect, I believe, with the factory sway bar. So I'm unfortunately in the middle of a bunch of things, and I'm gonna put out another video in a couple weeks because I did end up finding an engine, transmission, and a rear end, which the engine is currently finishing up at the machine shop now, thankfully. So there's much to come on this. It's in a state of disorder. It does get overwhelming at times, and you know, going back and having to redo things and change things is always frustrating, and you try and avoid it, but this is just one of those deals where things change, and things changed. On the forums, I did a bunch of research with the brake lines. I will put a link to that thread in the description. But basically, if you pull disc brakes off of I don't know about 71, 72, but after 72, disc brakes, the caliper mount for your brake line, your banjo bolt, faces forward. And what some folks have been doing is using a short little line about this long and Uing it up to the rear side of the upper control arm, where the factory mount location would have been at least 67 through 70. And I did some tests on it here. I went and got the same hose part that other folks were using, and there's just way too much interaction between the hose and the other members of the suspension up front. So I would not recommend doing it that way. I don't think it's worth the risk of losing your brakes. So the simplest way to do that is just drilling a hole on the front side identical to the back and mounting the brake hose to go to the front side or the forward side of the control arm. It clears everything very well. I'm very happy with that. So I'll post some information about that too. But this is just kind of an update video. my apologies for not posting anything in like 200 days. I had surgery, and just as I was finally recovering from that, which was a significant ordeal, ended up catching the crud, which has unfortunately kind of stuck with me still. Get a little bit better, kind of go down again, get a little bit better, go down again. So still fighting through that and trying to make progress. So appreciate everybody who's watching. Please like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll be seeing you very soon with some exciting action with the engine.